The Seattle, Oregon, Idaho, and Washington State Wine Awards are proud to highlight our 2022 tasting panel and their expertise on evaluating nearly 1,000 wines, mead, and ciders from the bountiful vineyards and orchards of the Pacific Northwest. For 16 years, Christopher Chan has been producing the most comprehensive wine evaluation in the region.
Christopher, for one, is just super fun, but I think he and the team in general just give you all the tools that you need to really judge appropriately and well, and having all the fun snacks and just the energy that he and the team provide makes it a nice event.
Each member of the tasting panel brings their unique palate, experience, and perspective to this single blind evaluation format.
I think having the wines in a single blind evaluation makes it easier because then we know what the winemaker is striving for. And so having them tell us what their goal is, we can tell how close they got to where we think that eventual result should be.
Having it single blind, we only don't know the producer. We know the varietal, which really gives us a chance to dial in and is it varietally correct? Rather than trying to guess the varietal, you can determine a wine as sound without knowing the varietal, but it's hard to determine typicity without knowing the varietal.
Single blind is important because you want to have some context in the wine that you're judging. So a double blind doesn't work so well if you're doing several varieties or styles.
The quality and variety of fruit coming from both vineyards and orchards in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho is world-class, rivaling many of the best growing regions around the world.
The quality of the fruit is incredible. So the Pacific Northwest has a really great growing climate, and having the gigantic rain shadow effect of the Cascade Mountain Range changes everything for eastern Washington and for Idaho. And then having the gentle sheltering of the Pacific Mountain Range, and then channeling some of that moisture into that little valley of the Willamette makes that a spectacular growing climate as well. And then Southern Oregon has its own really unique strengths as well, and they're really finding their voice as to which grape varieties they think can really thrive and show well.
The overall quality is very good. It's ripe, at sometimes slightly overripe, just because it is parts of Washington State are pretty warm, and it is basically, for all intents and purposes, high desert, 8 inches of rainfall a year for the Columbia Valley. But the overall quality is ripe, healthy fruit.
Outstanding fruit allows the region's winemakers to start with a solid base and then build their unique flavor profiles into each vintage.
The wines are outstanding. Consistency of quality, which is sometimes hard to arrive at. So when you recognize that everyone, in a sense, might have a shared fate, being of a wine region, you see what cultural values are being placed upon vintage, and maybe even regional typicity.
Every winery has a different profile to offer to all their customers. We can get fruit from the same vineyard, block by block, and the winery down the road is making a different style. So wherever you go throughout the state, there's always something different to offer, even amongst the vineyard or amongst the winery. So that's what makes wine exciting, what makes it amazing, keeps it fresh and lively. So there's really great wines coming out, and they taste different.
Overall, we've seen great concentration with a real purity of flavors and fruits, and probably a little bit more restrained use of oak across the board.
Ultimately, the best of the best stand out as each panelist uses a proprietary scoring system to determine their top choices and provide tasting notes for their favorites.
I think really if you're coming down to the, what is it, and is it showing what it should be? Like whether it's a Cabernet Sauvignon, is it really typical of that grape to be that wine? And I think that might, for me, push it up a little bit higher.
Ultimately, when you have two wines that are really close, what is the one thing that sets one apart? And for me, it's an emotional response to the wine. If you've ever had the moment where you're driving a car and you hear that song, like, oh my God, it reminds me of prom. It's you all of a sudden are thrust back into that sense of place, that sense of time, and you have an emotional response to it. When you're looking at two wines, that's are relatively similar, there's one that I find I connect to emotionally as a person. And for me, that is the difference between, say 95 point wine and a 97, 98 point wine. It's all emotion.
You have to think also about ageability. If you're tasting cabs that are obviously meant to age, they have a little more oak, they might have a little longer skin contact, quite a bit of tannin. That might not taste good to me right this second. I might put it in my mouth and think, whoa, and I don't, the inclination might be not to rate it as high. But then I got to pull back and think, well, what's the winemaker going for here? Well, this is a style that is meant to lay down for a little bit. And in 10 years, this wine's going to be the best wine maybe of the lineup. But right now, it's biting me back a little bit. And so you have to think about each varietal.
Thanks for supporting our fantastic regional producers, and cheers to the best in Pacific Northwest wine and cider.